Okay, go live. All right. All right, welcome everyone. This is the fourth in our AARP Commission on Sustainability series. Thanks for joining us. I'm Linda Kruger, and I'm the local lead for the AARP Juneau Community Action Team, or CAT. And I'm here tonight with one of the co-sponsors for the series, Anjali Grantham from the Juneau Commission on Sustainability. And we're also receiving support tonight, I think, from Teresa Holt, the AARP state director up in Anchorage. I'd like to start this evening by acknowledging that the borough of Juneau is on the lands of the Glenadee and the Wishkitan of the Aquan and the Ishkitan of the Takuquan. These clans have been an integral part of the community's history, and because of their resilience, they continue to live on the land today. And we're able to enjoy this beautiful place because of their wise stewardship practiced by the ancestors of these clans. We're grateful for their continuing stewardship and care, Gunashish. I'd also like to thank Lillian Petershore for her guidance and assistance with this land acknowledgements. Gunashish, Lillian. AARP is the largest member organization in Alaska with over 75,000 members age 50 and older. And the AARP mission is to enrich the quality of life and empower people to choose how they live as they age. With 38 million members nationwide, AARP advocates for and works to equip each individual to live their best life. AARP believes strongly in the principles of collective purpose, collective voice, and the collective power of the 50+ population. Dr. Carolyn Brown brought the idea of this series to our Juneau AARP Community Action Team, and we agreed this was a good idea that fit with our mission. And we contacted the Juneau Commission on Sustainability member Steve Benke, who put us in touch with Anjali Grantham, and we were on our way working with the Commission on Sustainability to partner this series. Through this series, we hope to increase community engagement by presenting useful and practical information that can be implemented at the community, family, and individual level. We hope that these sessions empower people to take action in whatever ways are appropriate and feasible. We hope that you will find something that works for you. Maybe try something out this Friday, which is Earth Day. The Huffington Post just reported that 30% of Americans aren't worried at all about the impacts of climate change. We're hoping this series has enlightened a few people and provided paths toward more sustainability and reduction of carbon. One of AARP's focus areas is livable communities. Addressing the challenges of climate change and taking meaningful individual and collective action to reduce carbon are part of making our community more livable. Collective action itself is beneficial as social connection and shared purpose have been found to promote health and increase hope. With that, I want to welcome you all to tonight's program, and I'm turning things over to Anjali with JCOS to get on with tonight's program.
Thanks, Linda. Welcome, everyone. I'm Anjali Grantham. I'm Vice Chair of the Juneau Commission on Sustainability. I'm also the Chair of the Outreach Committee. And I'm joined by two other members of JCOS today, Colin Peacock, who's going to serve as the main moderator for tonight's webinar, and then Lisa Doherty, who's going to be one of the speakers. So the Juneau Commission on Sustainability is an assembly-appointed commission who's charged with advising the Assembly, CBJ Assembly, on all matters related to sustainability. Over the years, there's been many different focuses of the commission, and currently the two big focuses that we have are on energy issues related to, of course, reducing carbon emissions through beneficial electrification. Also, we have a big focus on zero waste planning and circular economies. And so today's panel really merges these two concepts, right? It's all about how food and waste can turn away from being something that's carbon, like a big carbon emitter and creating climate change, to being something that could help to be a climate change solution. So we're thrilled to welcome all of the attendees and the panelists. And just so you know, there's some great policies that CBJ has in place related to energy and climate change. We have the Juneau Climate Action and Implementation Plan. There's also the Juneau Renewable Energy Strategy. You can find these on the Juneau Commission on Sustainability's website. And if you're interested in coming to a meeting, joining the commission, we welcome participation. You can join, still meeting via Zoom, but we meet Wednesdays at noon, and we welcome your attendance. So a little bit of housekeeping. You can feel free to use the Q&A button to ask questions. You can also use the chat feature to ask questions. We'll be keeping an eye on that, and it could be that some of the questions will be answered at the end of each of the panelists. But there's also questions that we might leave until the very end of the whole presentation. So feel free to communicate using either of those methods. And I will hand it over to you, Colin.
Great, thanks, Angela. So my name is Colin Peacock, and I'm going to moderate this session, and I'm very happy to do so because basically I feel like I've listened to these other sessions. Hopefully you've attended a few other ones. They've been very interesting, talking about reducing your carbon reductions in transportation and energy and housing, all these different areas that are sometimes maybe not as immediate or as fun as what we're going to talk about tonight, and probably something you're not maybe already doing. But the things we're going to talk about tonight, not only are things you're very likely already engaged in, but you're going to like be engaged in, because also we're talking about food and how to eat more locally, compost, reduce our food waste consumption by preserving food, eating seasonally, all these things that we kind of already, most of us, at least in Alaska, especially South Alaska, do and love doing. And not only are we going to talk about that, but we're going to talk about it with sort of the premier experts. These are the people that have educated myself and almost everyone I know that does this kind of work locally. Anyone that does food security work, anyone that grows food, harvests food, processes food, Darren, Lisa, Jennifer are especially people that have taught the community, have taught many groups of people. So really privileged to have them. Sarah Lewis too, who is not attending tonight, just so you know, under the housekeeping. She had something come up, but she recorded a video that we're going to play. And in order to start this talk off, I just want to talk a little bit more about kind of the overarching idea of maybe a resilient green economy, a food economy, a regenerative food economy. There's not really like an official term for this, but there is this idea that, when we talk about reducing our carbon waste, we're often just talking about a specific cycle of how we relate to food. And specifically in Southeast Alaska, we're talking about shipping in food, not growing your own food, wasting a lot of our food and not composting. And really, we're going to target the low-hanging fruit tonight, the areas in that system that regenerative food economy. Yes, Angela, yes, that is it. And actually, let me share a slide real quick, because this will make this a little bit easier for everyone. Let's see, not my email. Let's do, where's the thing I just had up? I don't know. 1 second. There it is. Okay, let me show that instead. Okay, screen sharing, correct. All right, so the regenerative food system. So Jennifer and I were coworkers at the Southeast Alaska Watershed Coalition, where we worked on food security issues. So we talked about this in a slightly different context, just the food system, but it's really hitting on all the things that I just talked about in our introduction. And tonight we're really focusing more maybe on the top half of this regenerative food system. And for those of you that are on the phone and can't see it, we're basically talking about a cycle where we talk about how you need to have soils essentially to grow food. How do you do that? You have a healthy ecosystem. How do you do that? Well, you also have to have waste recovery, not polluting that ecosystem, managing your waste so that you grow the soils in that ecosystem. And then, after you have that food grown, how are you transporting it? Is it by barge, thousands of miles over 2 weeks? Is it by plane, or is it local? Is it in your garden? So when I was saying earlier that we wanted to hit the low-hanging fruit in this, we want to hit the things that are the easiest for you as a home, as a community, as a household, as an Alaskan to affect, just by your own choices, your own actions, and give you some really practical solutions for what you can do right now that will lower your carbon footprint by your eating choices, by your waste choices. And to start that off, I want to start with Sarah Lewis's presentation from the Cooperative Extension here in Juneau. And she is going to share more about basically preserving food, canning food, and how that can impact your carbon footprint. And once again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. There might not be a ton of people right now, but a lot of people will come in and watch this, 60, 70 people later. So any questions you have will be really important for those other people that get to watch this later. So let me put her video up right now. Okay, 1 second. All right, here we go. Oops. And network cost. Let's try that again. High tech, high challenge. That's what I always say. Sarah Lewis.
Colin, we can't hear the video.
Okay, let's see what I can do to make that work.
When you do the share, Colin, if you make sure you check the box in the lower left hand of the share for you, and it'll say share sound.
Ah, thank you. That was it. Yep.
Hello, everyone out there in television land. Thank you so much to Anjali and Colin and everyone for inviting me to be part of the Grub and Garbage discussion to reduce our carbon footprint, to reduce our use of all kinds of different resources. And the one that, of course, I'm going to be talking about is food. My name is Sarah Lewis. I'm the Family and Community Development Agent for the University of Alaska Fairbanks Cooperative Extension Southeast District. So I'm here in Juneau, but my district goes from Yakutat all the way down to Metlakatla. So I teach throughout this area and of course a lot here in Juneau. I'm sorry that I have to be coming to you recorded, but shameless promotion, go support your local professional theater and buy some tickets to Fun Home and you'll get to see my son who's in it. So that's why I'm recording, because I'm off doing some stuff related to that this evening. So what I was asked to come here to do is talk about how to reduce our carbon footprint and our waste in the kitchen. And one of the main ways that I recommend people do that is by planning. And I know that you can go online and you can see lots of different strategies for planning your meals. You can print out whole, forms that you fill out for the week or the month. You can also, and I actually do recommend this, you can go to online menu services. You can pay anything from $2 to $15 a month and they will send you a menu for the week along with a grocery list, things like that. Because planning for the week ahead is one of the best ways to make sure you're going to eat all of the food that you actually either have or that you shop for. So, and there's other benefits to planning what you're going to be shopping for. Not buying random bags of potato chips, not that I've done that, but all of the temptations that are at the grocery store that if you don't go there with a plan, sometimes you end up with several meals of Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Who knows what you might end up with? So planning ahead, not that those would get wasted, but so let me tell you the process that I do, because I am all about quick and simple. So over the years, I have done all of those ones, from the most complicated to the online meal thing, and all that kind of stuff. But what I'm doing now, because I'm super busy, family's really, really busy, and I want to make sure that I'm not wasting things in the refrigerator, is every week I kind of go through this little process. So I have just this little, whiteboard, and this is the one that I had for last week. So for the week of April 10th, and I'm going to go ahead and wipe it off because I'm starting over for the week. And so this will be for the week of April, 17th. All right, and so then what I do is I do a refrigerator, freezer, pantry, potentially survey, but refrigerator and freezer tends to be the most important. And when it comes to waste, refrigerator is super important. Because a lot of times the things that are in the refrigerator are the things that, especially when it comes to produce, things that have a relatively short shelf life, you want to be using those up. So I start with that. And so I did a little bit before this because I knew that I only had 10 minutes. So I pulled out some of the things from my refrigerator that I know need to be used up within the next 3 days. So I've got a red pepper. I've got a very expensive little eggplant that I got for a special thing last week, and one was left over and it is like gold. So I've got to use that up. I've got some cherry or grape tomatoes. I've got some tomatoes on the vine that need to be used up pretty quickly, some random vegetables. Something that for dinner last night, my son and my husband, they got a rotisserie chicken. And so I'm always actually super happy when I find one of these because I'm like, done. Potentially 2 meals, more meals will come out of that. And I also have some beef broth that needs to be used up. So then I kind of, looked at the freezer to kind of see some things in there to make space. We're coming up on harvest season again. So we're trying to use up our frozen fish. We're trying to, depending on when I get more into fall, I'm actually trying to make space so that I can refill the freezer for emergency stocks and things like that. But right now we're getting ready for the next harvest season. So I will be thinking about what's down in the freezer. We have 2 chest freezers, 2 big old chest freezers downstairs that I will want to use some things from. So I've done a little bit of that. And then, so what I start doing is I start putting it down on the date, and I don't put a whole lot of information down. So tonight, because we've got the chicken, we've got tomatoes that need to be used up. I happen to know we have some mushrooms that need to be used up. We're going to have what I call refrigerator soup tonight. And I'll put some little notes to myself. So chicken, tomatoes, mush, just to let myself know that those are some of the things that I found that need to go in there. The next thing I found is, even though this is not our fish, it's been taking up in terms of what we harvested or what we purchased from fishermen. I bought this for a class a while back, and it's pretty well packed, but I want to use this up. It's been taking up space and I've been seeing it all the time. So I know that I want to use this. So what I typically do is I try to have at least 2 nights a week when I think that I call it freezer fun. I'm going to find something from the freezer to use. And so I think I'm going to be doing that tomorrow. So it's going to be freezer fun. And it's probably going to be, and this is another thing. So I do still subscribe to the New York Times cooking website. And so they will every week have 5 weeknight meals, or I can just go in and search and I can find really, their recipes have been terrific. And the weeknight ones usually have, they're pretty quick, etc. So I really like the weeknight meals. Let me turn my timer back on so I can see where we're at time-wise. Come on, there we go. Okay. Got a few more minutes left. All right, so I will probably do one of my go-tos is a sheet bake. So I'll probably do a salmon sheet bake. And I do know that, so I've got this, I've got the red pepper, which will roast up, bake up really nice. I've got some carrots. I've got the eggplant. I also happen to know that I have in the refrigerator some Brussels sprouts that probably just a couple, not a whole lot. So I'll put that into the mix. So I will do some kind of sheet bake with the salmon and whatever vegetables need to be used up within these first few days. Then I'm not actually going to use all this chicken for my refrigerator soup tonight. I will actually set some chicken aside because I do like to try to have one really big salad each week. And so I think Tuesday is going to be the big salad night. And that will have chicken. And I also have some apples that I need to use. They are not so far gone that I, need to make applesauce, but I'm probably, there's some bruising. So I'm going to need to cut them up. I'm going to put them in the salad with, so there'll be some chicken and some apples in that Tuesday salad. Now, another thing that I did before I came on is I looked at our calendar for this week, and it's a super busy week for us. So for example, I'm with you right now, but I'm also somewhere else right now. And so I also need to make dinner right now. So what we are going to be having on Wednesday is pizza. So that's going to be pizza night. I'm going to order it and we're going to pick it up on the way home and we're going to eat here. So I just know that's going to be pizza. And then Thursday, what I also try to do is at least one meal, usually more, especially on nights they're kind of busy. I do know that Thursday is going to be a little busy as well. So, and I know I've got some beef broth. And so I try to grab stuff from my pantry. So I do a lot of canning of soups and sauces. I teach classes on that. Shameless promotion at some point, take one of my classes on that. But I have some beef stew. And voila, I will extend that with some beef broth. I have some beans that I might add to it as well. We'll see how I feel about that. But so on Tuesday, we're going to do beef stew and salad. And then Friday is opening night of Fun Night that I'm sure all of you are going to rush out and get tickets for. I think opening night is sold out, so you're too late on that one. But we're going to go out to dinner. So I know that we're going out. So I'm going to put that on there. And then Saturday, I usually just say wild card because who knows what will have happened in the week by the time we get to next Saturday. So, one or more of these meals might not have been able to be made for whatever reason. Our schedule goes, crazy, whatever it could be. So I usually do leave Saturday as wild card, but what that also means is potentially trying to use things up on Saturday. And then on Sunday, I'll do this whole thing again. And so, a couple of little tips. One of the things is that I let me talk about vegetables just really quickly. Maybe I've got a minute or two. One thing I try not to do is buy aspirational vegetables. I like to have a plan, as ones that I need to refrigerate. So I like to have a plan for fresh vegetables when I buy them. Sometimes it's really hard, especially if you are, purchasing in person. I do a lot of Fred Meyer's pickup, so I tend to not end up doing spontaneous purchases, but I also do a lot of Salt and Soil. When Salt and Soil and Panhandle Produce, when they have stuff come in, they're who I go to for most of my salad fixings. And especially we're heading into harvest season, which is awesome. So I try to buy pretty much all of my greens as locally as possible. And that's why I typically have lots of salads, because that is both aspirational. So I really want to, I aspire to be able to buy as much locally as possible, but I don't want to waste it because local food is like gold. Local vegetables are like gold. And so I make sure to put salad on my week multiple times. And at any point I could make one of those because I buy lots of local stuff. But if you do your shopping in person and you see something like, like the incredibly expensive eggplant that I've got here that I should probably name and make part of the family, it was so expensive. I typically try to steer clear of these types of things unless I have a plan for it. And because if you don't have a plan for it, that's the more likely to get wasted. And that's a huge shame. So I guess that's my spiel. That's my thing is plan ahead for the week ahead. And it does not need to be complicated. Keep it as simple as possible, but base it on a survey of starting with your refrigerator. Then if you have freezer stuff to use up or pantry things to use up, move there. Base it on your schedule for that week. So that you're not accidentally planning to do, a roast beef meal on the night when no one's going to be home until 10 p.m. or whatever it might be. So do look at the, real time in your calendar to make sure that you're matching it. And leave at least one day as a wild card so that if you didn't get around to, cooking up that, eggplant or whatever it is, you have a time still set, and looking at your schedule, you're pretty sure that would probably be a good day to go ahead and do that. So thank you so much for watching my video. And I know there'll be great discussion moving forward with the group because you got some awesome people there. And have a really, really great week and plan for some good food. Bye.
Well, awesome. Thanks, Sarah. That was really great. And yeah, I took notes. Definitely, if you haven't checked it out, saltandsoilmarketplace.com. It's one of the best places for local food and panhandle produce on the way to Costco, or both here in Juneau, at least. Really fantastic choices. Yeah. Anyway, so moving on, we're going to have Jennifer New, who's calling in from a secret location. She won't have a presentation or video since she's on her phone, but she is here to talk about wild harvesting and how to incorporate into your life, some of the challenges to that. But I will just preface by saying wild harvesting is actually one of the lowest carbon things that you can do, as long as you're kind of doing it locally and not driving a far distance or flying a far distance, and actually one of the most fun, and we're just getting into that season. So without further ado, Jennifer New with the Southeast Alaska Watershed Coalition, the Community Food Sustainability Program Director and Food Security Catalyst for the Sustainable Southeast Partnership. Jennifer, you're muted currently. If you could unmute. There you go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much. And yeah, I wanted to just really extend my gratitude to you, Colin, and Linda, and Angeli, and all the organizers for this event. This is so exciting to be here with all these amazing food people. I have learned so much from everybody on this call, and looking forward to learning more. And yeah, so I guess I wanted to just kind of maybe piggyback a little bit on the things that Sarah had said in terms of the food print, reducing our carbon footprint through food choices and actions, and then I'll get into some harvesting tips. But once again, yeah, we are cultivating this mindset for the circular economy, and just like in the natural world, where there's no such thing as waste. Everything gets used and broken down and retransformed so that it can be used again. That's exactly what we're doing as we're doing all of these different things to reduce food waste through prevention, like as Sarah mentioned, but also preserving the harvest. So as you're doing any kind of wild harvesting, or if you come into a lot of something that they have at the grocery store, maybe there's just like way too many, carrots that come in on the barge, or if somehow we end up with an abundance of something, I did want to put in a plug for the Cooperative Extension and all of their resources for learning how to preserve using canning safely or dehydrating and other methods. But yeah, so again, just going back to this mindset and making all of these different tips and tricks doable, I think what's really important is thinking about how, as eaters, knowing that we are also, we have an important role in doing what we can and making it fun, just like what Sarah was saying. And so just a couple thoughts about as we're looking at reducing reducing food waste, we're really honoring. It's coming from a place, at least I like to see it as coming from a place of honoring the efforts of whatever places the food is coming from, whether it's far away down in the lower 48, or whether it's in our backyard, the land that we live on, Tlingit Ani. And so, our efforts are coming from out of gratitude and out of honoring all of the efforts that people have in growing or transporting or harvesting and preparing these foods. And so, yeah, and I think, okay, so I was going to mention also something that really motivates me is that I grew up with rabbits and gardeners. And so for us, anything that we didn't use for cooking went to our bunnies or to our compost bins. And I know Lisa's on here and we'll talk about composting, but yeah, I just wanted to plug in that she's got an amazing ticker on her website that keeps track of how much food waste gets diverted from our landfill. And so I just wanted to give a shout out that that's been a huge inspiration, and that I love being a contributor to that ticker for anything that gets kept out of our landfill. And let's see. So yeah, so for wild harvesting, I wanted to acknowledge my Tlingit teachers who have taught me so much about respectful harvesting. So acknowledging Vivian Yake Mork of Planet Alaska. She's a traditional foods and medicines educator who co-authors a weekly column in the Capital City Weekly. And so I encourage everybody who's interested in learning about wild harvesting to check out her column in the Capital City Weekly online. There's years and years of wonderful articles that she and her mother, Vivian Faith Prescott, have authored. So really fantastic resource for learning about what's harvestable in what season, and her recommendations and tips for doing it in a respectful way that doesn't reduce the availability of these plants, but actually enhances the abundance. So it's really wonderful to be aware and even challenge yourself to learn about how the things that we do can actually have a multiplicative effect on the plants that we harvest, because some plants like nettles, they love being harvested, like our herbs. And so being able to observe very carefully these plants and noticing patterns in, as we're harvesting, does it come back more year after year? And also just being, just investigating what is it that we do that can have an enhancing effect on the wild food resources that we have. Is people can really work with the land. There's this concept of tending the wild. And so we're working in partnership with the land, that we're taking care of the land, and then the land takes care of us. And so that's a really big tenet of respectful harvesting, as you're learning about harvesting or as you're going out onto the land and investigating what's out there. Just keep that in mind, that we are we're in partnership with the land. There's this concept called reciprocity, and the reciprocity is something that everybody can practice, and it takes it would look different for everybody. You will find your own way of practicing reciprocity, but basically it means not just taking but also giving back. So some of the things we do is, if we go out on the land to harvest, we may offer a gift to the land. And the gift could be something tangible, or it could be something intangible, like a song, like a prayer, just like sharing some time, sharing a moment with the land, just to acknowledge what it's providing for us and acknowledging the relationship that we have, and the responsibility also to take care of the land. Also, when we do harvest something, maybe we'll have leftover plant bits, and we like to return those to the earth where we harvested them. So say, for instance, I harvested a bunch of high bush cranberries, and they have these wonderful seeds that I don't include in the things I eat. So I'll save those seeds and I'll put them back in the forest so that they can regenerate. Or if you're cleaning, dandelions and you have a lot of things that you're not using, put those back out on the land where it came from so it can continue to nourish the earth. so reciprocity and giving back, and being mindful of what we're taking out of the system, and then being able to put back anything that we're not using. Or you can compost. You can put that stuff in your compost bucket with Juno compost, and Lisa will take care of it. That's another way that I like to give things back to the land is through composting and through our composters. Another form of reciprocity can be also practicing that stewardship component. So we may, go out and harvest, and we may want to also take the time later on or before, or when the opportunity presents itself, to remove invasive species or help pick up trash. I've recently, and actually I'm glad that we mentioned Lillian. Lillian introduced me to these really cool grabber thingies, and I think they help people. They're like reaching aids, so they can help you reach things that are hard to reach, but they also can help you reach trash that's on the ground, so you don't have to touch it, but you can pick up trash, all around our community, to really give back to the land by taking care of it. And me how these grabbers can really grab the finest, smallest things. So if we take the time to pick up trash, or participate in some of the cleanups, that's another way of practicing reciprocity. And it all relates to that giving back. Another way of practicing reciprocity is removing invasive species. Colin mentioned the Southeast Alaska Watershed Coalition. There's a really wonderful invasive species removal program run by John Hudson, and I would encourage anyone interested in invasive species removal to contact John and come out when they're doing any invasive species removal, and also replacing those invasive species with wild edibles. So with our native plants that are perfectly edible and can quickly restore those areas that have been taken over by the invasives. So, planting salmon berries. Salmon berries grow really fast, and they provide us delicious delicious leaves for tea and berries, and they're beautiful. Planting native plants after invasive species have been removed is another way that we can practice reciprocity. And so these are just some different ideas for how we can really celebrate this land and what it gives to us. And another tip that I really enjoyed learning from Vivian Mork, and it's just a fantastic practice that we can incorporate especially for us wild harvesters, is being aware of cleaning. When we're harvesting wild things, of course we want to harvest when things are abundant. We don't want to harvest when there's very few numbers of things, or if there's just something that doesn't grow in abundance in our area. So when we do encounter abundance, we want, that's when we'll harvest. But when we're harvesting things, harvesting is only a small amount of time for transforming that wonderful food into something that we'll take home and cook and eat. There's usually something that needs to be cleaned or processed, like fiddleheads, for instance. Anybody that harvests fiddleheads knows that there's a lot of cleaning. It's got all of those little brown things. And so a tip that I learned from Vivian, I'm really very thankful for this tip, is to clean as you go. So if you're going to go and harvest something, if you clean as you go, clean that fiddlehead before putting in your bag, then you'll be able to harvest a manageable amount of whatever it is that you're harvesting. Because a lot of waste and a lot of over harvesting happens when we harvest more than we can handle. And so if we only have a certain amount of time to harvest, and we only have a certain amount of energy and time when we go home, we don't want to harvest something from the land and then let it rot and go to waste when we get back home, just because we don't have enough time, there's other things going on, life happens. If you clean as you go, then you'll take home the amount that you can handle, and then you don't have to clean when you get home. And it's wonderful. This is a wonderful technique or practice to do with berries as well. I know that for instance, when I go out and harvest berries, I love picking them, first of all, with my hands, so I can do some quality control. I'll eat the ones that are a little soft, and I'll put the things in my bucket that are good. I'll also make sure to leave the leaves and the sticks out on the land and not take those home. And so if you clean as you go, then when you get home, you can just, you can put them away. I know there's many times that I have seen people harvest with those pickers, and those pickers can do a lot of damage to the bush itself. So I do warn that it can do damage to berry bushes, because a lot of times those bushes have next year's growth on there. And so you want to be careful using those pickers. And the other thing with using those pickers is that there can be leaves and sticks that get in your bucket, and that just adds for extra work when you get home, unless you want to sit and clean your stuff out in the field. But I would just kind of be aware that some of those things kind of seem like they're shortcuts in the beginning, but then they end up being a lot more work in the end. So I encourage, just try it. Try cleaning as you go whenever you're harvesting. And that way you can leave whatever you don't need out on the land, and you take home exactly what you need when you go home at the end of the day. So you have, you can celebrate more, you have less waste, and you clean later. And I think that, I'll just kind of like wrap up my time by just saying that, this zero waste mentality, I think it's fun. For me, it's like a game. I like seeing how little I can waste. I like seeing how little organic matter goes in my trash can, because I don't like taking out the trash. I love feeding the bunnies, and I love taking my bucket of compost to Lisa. I just love knowing that any of the organic matter that I have is going back to the earth, going back into the cycle, and that all of that good energy is also going back into the system. And so that's kind of that really keeps me going, because I know it takes more time, but it's exciting, it's fun, it makes me feel really good. And so I just really encourage everyone to, as you're starting out or as you're incorporating different tips and tricks, to really feel good about yourself as you're doing these things. Really celebrate and thank yourself for all the efforts that you're doing to reducing food waste, to honoring the land that's providing all of the nutritious foods that are close to home, and honoring our wonderful educators and composters and gardeners and growers that are in our community. And that's it for me. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. And I just want to remind everyone, if there are any questions for any panelists, or if anything came up while they're talking, please throw those in the chat. And if it's relevant to something very specific they said, we'll answer it right after. But generally, we're going to try to hold most questions off the end. I'm just encouraging people to ask questions. So coming up next, we have Darren Snyder, also with the Cooperative Extension. Darren is one of the premier gardeners and teachers of gardening here in Juneau, and helps run community gardens and teach gardening to all levels of education. I've learned so much from him. Without further ado, Darren, if you unmute yourself, turn your video on.
All right, thank you so much, Colin, and thank you already to Jennifer and Sarah for sharing. I too have been learning great deals from each of them and each of you who are on here. Many of you who I've noticed are in our current audience, so thank you to each of you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, hopefully successfully here, and we'll see how this goes. And I will try and change this to a presentation mode of sorts. Yep, where is that? Oh, there's the slideshow. Okay, so I'd like to just kind of acknowledge that we're all trying our best, and this is a very tough row to hoe, if I may get kind of punny with it. As far as how do we go through this society and work in this society, and at that has been built upon carbon, and now start chipping away at how to reduce our use of that carbon and our production of that carbon. The goals of I was asked, I should say, about how can community gardening and gardening in general be done in a way that does help reduce our carbon footprint. And so I'm going to try and address that, and hopefully I'm successful with that. But also I'm going to just kind of address that so many of our efforts around food and around growing are so embedded within our culture that we can't pick apart any one aspect of it and say, this is why I do it, and this is going to be the ultimate outcome. At least I haven't been able to do that or found anybody else who does. It's so intertwined with us. I mean, what do we need? We need shelter, water, and food. And so when it comes to food, it's so ingrained. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of try and stay with the theme here of community and growing with community and community gardens. So when we think about growing with others, and community gardens are a popular and successful model for doing so. Just about anybody in communities can find a way to grow with others. If that's a formal community garden, or if they want to make it one, then there are ways that people can step forward and do so. I have had the honor of helping many people to do so, and then also helping those who are operating theirs to just try and to maybe make improvements here and there and address the challenges, because we're ultimately a bunch of humans trying to work together with this goal of growing food, but also being together and having a successful time together. And anytime we all get together and try and do this, then it's going to be messy, but we can be successful. So who? It's everybody. What are you trying to achieve with your gardening? I think it's really important for us to address that. And many of us think of gardening inherently as something that's a natural thing. And so there's conflict, because we know, I'm going to kind of be Juno-centric here, that almost all of our inputs into our gardens are being brought in through a heavily saturated carbon system, whether it's how they're produced or just transporting here or how they're packaged. And so it is a very difficult prospect to be addressing this carbon issue with our gardening and general sustainability with our gardening. So we can all, again, do our best and chip away at it, and to share our successes. And I hope to do some of that with you this evening as well, some specifics. If you are looking for more specifics, maybe I can actually complete my own personal introduction here. I am Darren Snyder with UAF Cooperative Extension, based in Juneau, primarily serving Southeast Alaska. I run the Master Gardener training program and support communities throughout the region as well as possible. And if you would like my assistance and the assistance of the University of Alaska Cooperative Extension, please get a hold of me. I should be very easy to find. And as long as everything's working well, then I can be easy to be contacted. So just Google Juneau Cooperative Extension Service and you should be able to find me. I'm going to go ahead and jump to from the who, what to the where. Community gardens, as we know here in Juneau, sometimes it's hard to find a spot, and that spot can be a 10 or 20-minute drive away. That's difficult. That's either carbon or high calorie and time required, and a lot of fortitude if you're going to try and get there without a car. But Ideally, we have community gardens and opportunities to grow within reach, literally. There's a lot to permaculture concepts where the idea that you're able to access your food that's most needed on a daily basis, right outside your door, your kitchen garden, and then you have your gardens that you're needing to tend on a regular basis within the periphery, and then those things that you only need to access a few times throughout the season are further out. So the idea, ideally, is that you have a ready access to what you need on a daily basis, so you're not needing to drive out and go tend something or harvest something that you're just going to need on a regular basis. And ideally, your whole garden is somewhat close or within a reasonable distance to your home. I'm going to address some concepts on that. And gardening, as us gardeners know, there's seasonality, but it's really a year-round process. We're always thinking about it. We're recognizing where we are in the seasons, whether it's thinking about the seeds that we're going to be harvesting or how we're preparing our beds for the next growing season. And when do we do what? That is a lot of the magic and the science of successful gardening, is when we employ our different practices. Why? I've addressed that a little bit. We all have our motivations. Gardening for many is not a community experience; it's a personal experience, and so but we're all part of the society no matter what. And so that's so the whole idea of getting together is definitely a major part of it. And how? There are many ways. So I'm going to go ahead and go forward. So specifically, strategies for reducing and I'm focusing on food production carbon footprint. I wanted to kind of bring up a few things. First, I'm going to share this photo here that I took just a couple of days ago. I'm having the honor, as all of us here in Southeast Alaska and the Juneau region, to be living and working on Tlingit Ani, as Jennifer New shared. And I have the honor of working with the folks within the Tlingit Cultural Language Learning Program based in the Harborview building there, the TCLL Tlingit Immersion Program. And so we're doing gardening in there. We're preparing plants to go and to be harvested, to be planted out into the gardens on that campus as well. We're growing some flats of baby greens. And if any of you, or when you, if you haven't already, become familiar with some of the eagle stories around the bed of kelp, and how all the creatures, the Tlingit story of how the creatures were in that bed of kelp. We had a kind of a community building accidental metaphor with this, where we were building our own bed of kelp, and it was a beautiful experience. And I just want to start in with, I'm going to be having some pictures here, so long as I have a little bit of time, about some of our community building projects. And this is just one that I'm into, being able to be involved with right now. So on as far as ourselves, as we are trying to reduce our food production carbon footprint, the big idea is local. The closer it is to your home, the less likely you're going to be using carbon to accomplish your goals. So I used this old reduce, reuse, recycle 3 R's idea here, and of course the ultimate and first and foremost concept of recycling is recycling the nutrients. I really look forward to hearing Lisa again, and I enjoyed every time talk about how she's facilitating that here in Juneau and her expertise. But there are other ways that we can recycle, that we can get things that are otherwise pretty much ready for the dump in the normal way, such as old decking. I have old decking, old 2x6s that are not good enough for decking anymore. I mean, we were literally falling through, but that can be salvaged and used for garden beds, which will last for years and years. So all kinds of ways to recycle, reusing, buying used tools, old sheds. There's so much. We are a stuff-rich society, as you all are well aware. So just spending a little bit of extra effort to put out a word if you need something, there are probably 10 of them out there. So don't buy new if you don't have to. That is definitely a huge carbon reducer if you don't ask for something to be produced out of whole cloth, as it were. And then reduce, sharing your extras. So many times, you know, I'm a bargain buyer, maybe more than most, but I'll buy a whole roll of something and maybe use most of it, some of it, not much of it. And to be able to get, you know, to have somebody else use those extras. My friend Jay Donnig, who runs the AK Reuse Yard, that's the big idea there. It's over there near the brewery in Juneau. And so that you don't have to buy something new. This is extras. Also, just good planning, similar to what Sarah was sharing, is essential so that you're not, again, buying too much or producing too much, or too little for that matter, and causing waste. Our materials that are local, that all gardeners are pretty well aware of, but our local seaweed, of course, is the pinnacle of our local resources that we can just go gather up. Local sand, peat, lumber from our woods here are all things that we can do locally. I'm going to respect that we have probably a tighter time frame that I'm allowing for here, so I'm going to go ahead and just continue a little bit more quickly. We have, of course, buying from local producers, food producers, so that things don't have to be shipped in. I mean, to ship in a seed compared to refrigerated transport to bring something up even from California is much less carbon when we do buy from our local producers. So one last kind of focus here on our local production are so many renewable and passive opportunities. Our high tunnels and greenhouses. They don't even have to be actively heated, lighted, anything. All it's doing is the greenhouse effect, trapping that heat in there, extending your season, increasing your temperatures that are going to give you more production, because temperature is a limiting factor in our grow with our vegetables. They will get bigger, and the vast majority of them, and better if they're just a little bit warmer and a little bit drier. And so high tunnels and greenhouses works for that well. And of course, our classic hydro, solar, wind, excellent renewable resources that can contribute to our growing environments. Other carbon neutral opportunities, wood gasification. I'm very excited about it. We have a wood gasifier in town here. If you'd like to work with me on that and get a demonstration project going, learn more about wood gasification and even converting to electricity, then please get a hold of me on that. And as well, compost heat recovery. And speaking of Lisa, we've talked about this as well. And so hopefully we're going to get a demonstration project of this going potentially this summer, where we can actually pull heat from compost piles and use it to heat our environments. And with that, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Darren. That was great.
I'll unshare here. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thanks for doing that. Yeah, so coming up next and finally is Lisa Doherty with Juneau Compost and also the Juneau Commission on Sustainability. She is single-handedly changing the compost future and waste future of Juneau. I'm very happy to work with her as an entrepreneur, a activist, commercial fisherwoman. Yeah, Lisa, please take it from there.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm gonna just press share screen. And do you guys see my
Yeah,
screen?
we do. You just need to expand it, or yeah, slideshow. There you go.
Slideshow. Okay. Does it just say loading for you as well?
It does say loading.
Oh boy.
It's all right. You can just
Try again. I have everything else shut down. Let's see.
Do you want to pause your video or turn off your video to save bandwidth? Would that
Oh,
matter?
that's a good idea. Yep, I will
Okay.
stop video. Oh no.
Hmm.
Heck, I am so sorry.
Could you can you read it off instead? Would that work? Just talk about it.
Oh no.
That's
I think you can show the slides without doing slideshow because we could see them. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
that
not
could work.
Yeah, but we could see them. Just don't press slideshow.
Yeah, there we go. That'll work. Yeah.
Okay, you can see that.
Yep, perfect. Good
All
idea.
right, I'll just make it as big as I can.
It works.
Okay, I'm not
Good.
sure why that's not working, but okay, so here is slide 1. So yeah, I run Juno Compost. If you didn't get that memo already, I'm just going to give a 1-slide quick blurb about what that is. We recycle organics, and so we provide a curbside and drop-off options for food scraps and yard debris recycling. And then we manufacture soil amendments and blends to be used in growing local food and flowers. We started in 2017 and serve 550 accounts, and we collect between 5,000 and 12,000 pounds a week. And we're just about to hit 1 million pounds. We're 950,000 pounds of food scraps diverted from the landfill with just 1 to 2 staff running. So next is, what actually is composting? It's just a kind of recycling. So we think about the 3 R's, and we tend to think about recycling as paper or tin recycling, but we don't really think about food so much. It's just a kind of recycling, and it's basically where you're managing an ecosystem where micro and macro organisms can thrive, and they convert that material into finished compost. And so to me, that's really magical. It's a lot more magical than chucking your tin can into a blue bin and then hoping someone else is going to turn it into something else, right? Like, everybody has the ability to do this kind of recycling from start to finish on their own. And to me, that's really inspiring. And so you're just thinking about basic human needs are food, water, air, and shelter. And that's the same thing of a compost pile. So why should Alaska compost? So number 1 is we think about pollution, right? That's the doom and gloom part. Because when you put organics in a landfill, they don't have access to oxygen, and they're festering and they're emitting methane. And we know that methane is more potent than CO2. And so that's kind of terrible. And so the EPA lists the provision and disposal of food and goods as generating 42% of all greenhouse gases. So thinking about how we get our food and how we dispose of scraps or wasted food, how we get our goods and dispose of them, that is almost half of greenhouse gases. I mean, we tend to think about transportation, just driving your car, but really getting all of our stuff requires a lot of that transportation. So pollution is one reason, but then if you want to look at the pure joy of food production, composting can really take us to a new level of how much food we can produce, especially in Southeast and Juneau, where land is limited. You're not just taking a rototiller out to your yard in most cases and tilling up a plot to have a new bed. And so when we create soil amendments here, we're really able to have more space for growing food. So next, so what does composting do? So 1, it extends the life of the landfill. Anything that you're composting is not going to landfill, or if you have an incinerator in your community, that's also taking a lot of energy. Think about burning something that's really, really wet. A lot of food is 90% water. And so that takes a lot of energy. So we can extend the life of landfills. We can reduce our methane emissions. And also when we apply that compost, finished compost in the soils, it's actually sequestering carbon in the soils. And then it reduces our waste and recovers our resources. And it creates organic amendments for agriculture and gardening. It supports local food systems, and it also fosters local self-reliance. So one of those things that we kind of hear about is food sovereignty, where communities or people can be reliant on themselves and not basically married to big corporations for those things. And so when we look at our waste, we can think of ourselves as having waste sovereignty. We're not reliant on huge corporations to manage our waste for us, because they don't always have our best interests in mind. So I'm going to look at each of these things. So extending the life of landfills. So this pie chart here is from the EPA, and it's showing municipal solid waste, categorizing it, basically doing a waste audit. What's going into the landfill, and let's categorize it. And so on the left, I took everything that's in the chart, and that's compostable. So food is about 21% of what's headed to landfills. Yard debris is about 12%, wood waste is about 6%, and paper is about 23%. And so that equals 63% that is potentially compostable. Now, it's not all ideal. Some of that is going to be treated wood. Some of that is going to be paper that's coated with chemicals. But even if you were conservative and said 30% or 40% was ideal for composting, it is the biggest piece of the pie of what you can stop sending to landfills. It doesn't really need to be there. So here are some greenhouse gas. I will admit, I'm not a greenhouse gas person. It's not the thing that excites me most about composting, but it is a significant part of what composting can do for our planet. And so here is just some numbers that I pulled. So Alaska has over 133,000 public school students, and the EPA says that 26 pounds of food waste per student is generated each year at schools. So that would give us about 3.5 million pounds a year of food that's wasted just within Alaskan schools. And so if we think about recovering those, which could be done by having school compost systems that are on site and linked to school gardens, what a learning experience all those children could have. Another example is there are 253,000 households in Alaska, and the EPA states that 338 pounds of food waste per household per year is created. So that is just over 85 million pounds a year wasted at the home level. So when you add those together, 89 million pounds that could be composted or recovered for, to feed animals or to feed people. Well, I plug that into the little greenhouse gas footprint calculator, and it's basically saving 210,000 tons of CO2 equivalent, which is like 45,519 passenger cars taken off the roads for 1 year. So if greenhouse gases are your thing, that's what composting does. So here's another one. So composting reduces waste and recovers resources. And I really like to think about food scraps as an Alaskan commodity. Some people call it food waste, but waste isn't waste until you waste it, right? And so that's why I'm always careful to say food scraps, because they're not being wasted when you do something with them. And so if we think about it as an Alaska commodity, we can have a whole different mindset. And one thing I compare this to as a commercial fisherman is a long time ago, or not that many years ago, dog salmon, the gill netters would just strip out the roe, and then they would just throw the carcasses overboard because there was no market for them. And now, as a gill netter, the carcasses are super valuable, and we don't strip roe, we sell the whole fish. And it seems quite silly that people used to do that. And so I like to think that throwing food scraps away is going to seem very silly in the near future. So there are a few disconnects that kind of are around this. So thinking about trashing our organics while importing soil amendments. If you go to Home Depot, you will just see the big sea of parking lot sea of pallets stacked super high full of soil amendments that are barged from elsewhere. We can create that all here. Thinking about importing greens or other vegetables from California when 6 months out of the year, those things can easily grow here. And also importing petrochemical fertilizers, so your synthetic nitrogen or NPK fertilizers, those are made using fossil fuels. They're using natural gas to make ammonia, and the whole process is pretty energy intensive. And it's also not the best thing for your soil. So thinking about producing compost and local fertilizers is really part of that food waste key to reducing your carbon footprint. And then you also have to think about the wasted resources of energy, land, water, distributing, processing, preparing food. All of those things go into food that is getting shipped here that is wasting. It's not like if the apple goes bad, oh, well, it's just one apple. It's like all of the labor and shipping and everything that went into producing that apple that went bad. And I'll just say, when you grow your own apples, you don't let any of those puppies go bad. So local food is always a good way that you know you're going to eat that food. Okay, so getting back to compost, creating organic amendments for agriculture. And so agriculture is also gardening, right? And so compost feeds the soil. It has slow release nutrients, and it also has biology, right? Compost is alive. And so it's not just like, oh, well, I'm adding nitrogen to my garden. Yeah, you are, but you're also adding worms, and you're adding worm castings, and you're adding all kinds of bacteria and fungi that are really going to make your soil thrive because it's becoming an ecosystem. Compost is able to hold on to nutrients without them leaching, which is pretty important in a rainforest. And healthy plants, when your plants are healthy, they're not as prone to diseases. And so you're less likely to need pesticides, whether they're organic or otherwise. Compost retains moisture, reducing the need to water. And so if we think about outside growing, you might not want that attribute. You might want a bunch of sand in your garden and not so much compost. But if you think about starting your seeds, you really want those moist. So lots of compost in there is good, or in container or greenhouse or high tunnel growing. And then also, yeah, it can be used as a very high proportion of a substrate for growing. So if you need to fill raised beds, compost can be a huge percentage of that. Yeah, and go to the next one. And then another big part of composting is fostering local self-reliance. This is really important to me because, yeah, when you have decentralized systems, everything is more resilient. And so there is no way, right? And so if we are more aware of our food, our waste, our consumption, we're able to make this loop a little more closed. And it also builds community, right? When we talk about, oh, they're going to haul my garbage away, or they're going to send my seeds to me, we can change that to we. And that's just pretty exciting. And so, yeah, just basically the more decentralized our systems become, it's better for the planet, it's better for community, the society, and it's also better for the economy, thinking about circulating local dollars. So scaling all of that back, this is just taking a look at things for what they are. So food scraps are actually an Alaska commodity. Composting is recycling at the source. Finished compost is actually local fertility. And local fertility usually tends to mean more local food. And more local food tends to mean healthier people and planet. And it's a beautiful closed loop system. So getting a little more back to the actual process. So how do you compost? There's a bunch of ways you can do it. One is you can do it yourself, right? You can build a pallet compost bin in about 20 minutes, and you can start doing it right away. You could collaborate with your neighbors. There's a really awesome app called Share Waste. You can go to sharewaste.com, and in it, you can register yourself to either be a compost contributor or a compost receiver. And that way it gets different people who may have land or may not have enough scraps to compost together. Or you could hire someone to do it, like Juno Composts. And then on a bigger scale, you can advocate for community compost systems in your own community. And so that might be through letting your community know you think it's important and that the municipality should provide compost service, or you might uplift people who would like to provide these services. Alaska is kind of unique in that we don't really have many ordinances or incentives for people to compost. And so really this boils down to people making individual choices and creating the space that they want to live in.
Hey, Lisa, I just want to let you know we only have about 15 minutes left. So if we can perhaps wrap it up a bit early so we have room for questions, that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay, I will finish up in 1 minute. So inputs, if it grows, it goes. Food, paper, things, anything from your yard, all of that can go in a compost system. And then outputs, you can get compost, straight compost, you can get mulch. And then if you mix it with other things, you can make your own seeding mix, your own raised bed mix, and your own potting mix. And then the secondary outputs are all the delicious food that comes from it. And so here's the last one. What are you going to do with your food scraps tomorrow? So hopefully this was kind of inspiring for you to think about your food and the effect it can have on greenhouse gases and caring for our planet. And thank you. And just a random PS, Juneau Compost is hiring. So if you want to be part of this, you should apply. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lisa. Well, yeah, as usual, it was almost too good because now we have a million questions as a result of your presentation. So we answered a few of them in chat and we only have so much time left. So we're going to try and kind of hit some of the top ones. So let's just talk about the cost. What is the cost of participating in the Juneau compost program, just so people know?
The cost of Juneau Compost?
Yeah, yes. Just so it's on the record, so everyone knows.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. If you want to drop off your food scraps, it's $15 a month. If you want curbside, it ranges from $20 to $27 a month, and we pick up every single week.
Great. And then the other one that was just being discussed in the chat is about local foods and what are the challenges right now facing getting composting going in food systems, teaching children to compost in the school? I know we all worked on that, but perhaps you could speak to it, or Darren. Yeah. I don't know if either of you want to take that one, but nope.
I'm sorry, I didn't. Were you just saying the composting programs?
Yeah, sorry, I probably spoke really quickly.
It's a little convoluted. I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
Yeah, and not clearly. So the question was really more about, why isn't there more education or composting happening with children or with schools? And I know there's been several attempts to get composting programs going at schools. So it was a very general, open-ended question. I was curious if anybody wanted to respond to it on the panel. Yeah.
I'd love to briefly address it. It's in the same category in my mind as just generally the school gardens. And what it takes is staffing, and unless we can have you want to call it a hero or what have you, volunteer who's going to take up that thing, then there has to be designated staff, and it can't be classroom teachers. It is what I've found in the 12 years that I've been working on this in Juneau schools and elsewhere. So specialists, whether they be aides or counselors, they're usually the ones who are able to kind of bring in programs. But really, it's really touch and go because there is not staffing or dedicated people to it. So there are definitely shining examples. I mean, just Joel Boss over at LEAP program and Nels over at Riverbend at the LEAP program there. They've been doing great stuff in Harborview. There's so many great stories, but they're all extended efforts by individuals, and it's just a lot of work. It's hard. And there have been individual grants that have come through to help bolster programs to get them started. But then staffing changes, and then they just, and then things mothball pretty quick.
I'll jump in here, Colin. Teresa Holt up in Anchorage just mentioned the AARP Community Challenge Grant Program, and it just finished up for this year, but thinking ahead to next year, if Darren or Lisa or someone kind of wants to be a ringleader and maybe even gather some of the people who are on this presentation or see this presentation and put together a challenge grant proposal, then that's something that would qualify for AARP funding to develop a pilot program to initiate it at one of the schools. And I think that's a great idea, and kind of spinning off of this and getting a few people together who would be interested in kind of moving that forward. I can share with the information about the Challenge Grant Program, and yeah, that would be something that would be fun to see happen, and the kind of thing that AARP would probably fund.
Awesome. Well, great answers. Some other more straightforward questions, perhaps. We had a couple questions about terms. One person wanted to know what decentralized mean, and another person wanted to know what gasification meant during your talk, Lisa.
Yeah, so I'll take decentralization. So if you think about it having a central point, right? We don't see this too much in Juneau yet. So like a lot of places, waste management, there's a big dump or an incinerator somewhere, and then there are all these different transfer stations, right? And then all this waste is getting trucked many, many miles away to a centralized facility. And so like right now, Juneau's biosolids are actually sent down to, I think it's Washington, maybe it's Oregon, to a centralized facility there. And so when you have decentralized systems, it's like each community is handling its own waste. Or if you have a decentralized food system, each community is trying to tackle growing its own food. And so it's just basically focusing around individual communities or individual groups rather than larger systems.
And then, yeah, in terms of gasification, what were you talking about during your lecture when you said that?
That was actually me.
Oh, was that you? Oh, sorry. I just wrote that note down. Yeah.
Yeah, gasification and then also compost heat recovery.
Yep.
They are technologies that are proven, but how to apply them to our specific situations and where would they apply? The fact is, we're here in the middle of Tongass Forest. There is a lot of carbon here that is I guess part of the renewable carbon stream. I don't know how far people like to look out. I'm hoping for humans to be here for, if not hundreds, then thousands more years. And if this is post-fossil carbon, and then I understand a future that includes using carbon such as wood as a fuel. And gasification is very effective. It essentially heats up the wood, turns it into a gas form. That gets either ignited directly for heat, or it can go through a motor, even a gasoline motor. It's famous for World War II technology applications. They ran trucks, cars, everything else off of wood. And there are current geeks who are really into it in Europe as well as in the United States, and they'll run their trucks off of a wood gasifier. We could do that with boats and everything else in Southeast Alaska. We could use pellets. Anyways, and you can generate electricity, of course. Now hydro, if you're talking about where energy is sourcing, has many more beneficial attributes as far as carbon goes, but there are limitations, as we know as well. I don't even get into the battery issue. Yeah. So sorry, go ahead.
No worries. Actually, another one for you, I think, Darren. It was do you have any pearls of wisdom for starting a raised garden bed? Yeah.
Oh, tons of pearls
Yeah,
and gems and all that kind of stuff. So please just get a hold of me. I don't know if I pressed send on yet. See my email there. And look up gardening in Southeast Alaska. We have a great publication on that. We can do garden classes. I do garden classes.
Yeah.
Look up the Southeast Master Gardeners website. Wonderful stuff.
Another one in that same vein. What are the best ingredients for my mulch barrel on the porch or in the garden? Anybody, Lisa or Darren?
Sure. So mulching is just anything you're using to cover the soil, right? And so compost is something you can use. The chunky things that you sift out of your compost is good to use. I like to use cardboard in the fall time, seaweed, leaves, straw, literally anything that will eventually rot, you can lay down on your soil. Wouldn't use shredded paper, for the summer or anything, but laying down cardboard in the winter will give it time to break down.
Very good. Somebody also wanted to know if pet composting or pet waste composting is a thing. I know there's some issues with that. Lisa, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, it's totally a thing. I've actually written a couple of proposals and sent it into CBJ, and it sounded like there was some interest, but there's always loose threads, and I wasn't going to be the squeaky wheel on that, but yes, it's totally doable in a safe way. A lot of times it's not used for edibles, just because of the fear factor. If you're composting it correctly at high temperatures, then there are going to be no pathogens. There's not going to be anything harmful in there. Municipal sludge, biosolids, which is what goes through the wastewater system that has all of your poop in it. A lot of that, like in Fairbanks, they make that into compost that's used in gardens. And so as long as you're achieving those hot temperatures, everything is safe. But for the most part, companies that I know of down south who do pet composting, pet poop composting services, they just kind of recommend it for flowers and trees and things, just because I think it's that social ick factor. But yeah, if you think we should have that at trailheads instead of lots of plastic bags going to the landfill, you could remind the city about that wonderful pitch I gave.
That sounds good to me. Does anyone have any other questions? We're about done with our time. We got a couple minutes. I also want to let you know that Jennifer New did share that she had to leave. But if you did have any questions for her, I shared her email in the chat, but just once again, it's jnu@ecotrust.org, and I'll share it one more time. And if we don't get any more questions, I think that's it. So Linda will take it from there.
Wow, this has been so cool. I have learned so much from all of the presenters and all the questions that came in tonight. Thank you all for participating. Thank you, Colin and Jennifer and Lisa and Darren and Sarah and I've gotten so much information. I have so many takeaways and so many notes. And I hope everyone who watches this is watching tonight has learned something, and the folks who log in and watch it in the future learn some things too. We still have one more program in this series. 2 weeks from tonight, we'll wrap up the series with a session on building resiliency. We probably here in Juneau, we all know that climate change is affecting us. We know how it's affecting us physically, mentally, and emotionally. So what do? What can we do to stay healthy and continue to build community during times of anxiety-inducing change? So that this series is part of giving us some opportunities to feel like we can do something. But what are some other things that maybe we haven't thought of? What things can we do for our mental health and well-being? And so that's what our focus will be in the final session. I just want to close out by saying thanks again to all the presenters and the organizers who assisted with tonight's program. If you pre-registered for tonight's session, you'll be receiving a link to the recording so that you can watch it again and share it with friends who were unable to watch tonight. If you joined us on Facebook Live, you'll be able to find the link on also on AARP's Facebook page and the AARP Alaska home page tomorrow. We'll get that up tomorrow. So hopefully you'll share that widely. I think it was well worth sharing. Lots of information there. And again, thanks to all the presenters, and thanks for everybody out there who attended tonight. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Good night.